Hey, welcome in everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. It is August 28th. It is Thursday. This is your live weather impact here. We're talking some great weather again today. I feel like this week the forecast has been on like cruise control. This has been one of those weeks that you just love to live in the Carolinas because we've had perfect weather. But we do have a few changes that we're going to see going into the weekend. Certainly a little bit warmer for the end of the week, and the Labor Day weekend is here. A lot of folks, I feel like today, were bailing because it looked like the traffic, at least people are maybe making this a 4-day weekend and heading out of town early. Let's start with satellite radar together. Still no rain, but we are seeing high clouds moving. We are seeing some pretty cloudy skies out there right now. So if you're out and about this evening, you might notice the sunshine not quite as prevalent as it was early. It's not your imagination. There is quite a bit of cloud cover moving across the sky right now. In fact, as I'm saying that, I'm going to bring up our Dallas camera real quickly just so we could take a sneak peek at it, because the Dallas camera does show quite a bit of cloud cover out there. You can see it looking off towards Charlotte. So that's Charlotte behind the guy wire there. Off to the right, that is actually Spencer Mountain there. So it's definitely pretty cloudy, but it's the high clouds. It's not the low gray cloud deck that you normally have when you're getting it rain or something like that. Now, temperatures obviously below normal again today, but we were closer. 84 was the high temperature today. 87 is typically our high temperature this time of year. So for the day, we've been about 6 degrees below average because of the cool start this morning. Right now, 70s. I mean, that's nice. Upper 70s right now. Feels like football weather. College football starting this weekend. Watching a game here in the studio. We got a big game tomorrow, which we're going to talk about in Uptown coming up here in a minute. Tonight, we drop down into the upper 50s, low 60s tomorrow. Certainly the warmer day of the week, the warmest day we've seen so far, maybe 86, 87. And it's all depending on the sunshine. We get enough sunshine, we certainly are going to see the potential for some upper 80s tomorrow. Now, this is the game I was talking about, the Dukes Mayo Classic tomorrow in Uptown. Two local teams, which is great. We usually have some Carolina teams playing in this, but to have two local teams, Appalachian State taking on the Charlotte 49ers in Uptown. This actually should be a really good game. Temperature at kickoff, probably close to 80 degrees, but tailgating in Uptown is going to be awesome with low 80s as we go through the game, probably falling back into the 70s. So if you're heading uptown to that game, you're going to have some great weather. And you'll see skies clear out on our surface map here. Mostly sunny skies tomorrow afternoon. Now the weekend, Labor Day weekend, we do have some shower chances, and the rain chances that Tim and I were worried about early in the week have pretty much, I want to say evaporated, but have gone down completely. I am very confident we're going to have a good weekend, albeit maybe a few isolated showers, and here they are. You see Saturday, that's not much. Pop-up shower here or there. Sunday morning, a few pop-up showers. Those will move out fairly quickly, and again, nothing that's going to wash out your weekend. Now, the dry air, some fluctuations here. The dew points do briefly go back up just a hair Saturday and Sunday, so the dew points might creep up a little bit. You might notice a little bit of humidity, but not the air you can wear, mugginess up there in the 70s. And then next week, there are some signs that the dew points shoot up, and so does the chance of rain. And you'll see that depicted here in our 7-day rainfall forecast. Rain chances Saturday, Sunday, only about 20-30%, but notice Wednesday, Thursday next week, they actually jump up to about 50%, and that's because of the increase in moisture and possibly a system that'll be heading our way. But the 7-day rainfall totals, so the system that Tim and I were watching earlier this week, we talked about if you're going to the beach. I've had several people, DM me and message me, hey, I'm going to the coast for the final, kind of weekend of the summer. My phone app's telling me rain all weekend. That's not the case, folks. It is not going to rain all weekend. In fact, it'll just be isolated. You could see that storm track is well to the south. In fact, our 7-day rainfall totals could be less than 1/4 of an inch. So that's certainly not a huge amount of rain. Now, allergy sufferers. We always talk about this in the spring with the tree pollen, which is off the charts in the spring. This time of year is ragweed or hay fever season. So if you're a ragweed allergen sufferer, it's pretty bad right now in the high level. Also got quite a bit of mold out there. So mold is one of those things that can get to you, the mold spores, especially after heavy rain and warm temperatures. So you might notice that as well. Hey, I don't see summer making a big return. We've got this trough of low pressure that's digging down over the eastern half of the country. This has got two bonus benefits. It keeps us cool because it brings dry, cool air down, but it also blocks any tropical development. The Bermuda High out here can't steer things into the U.S. because the steering currents are all offshore or down to the south. So this kind of deters. It's like a giant force field for tropical systems and hurricanes. So this would keep all these systems away from us. And that's a good thing. We actually will have at least a 10-day period, a lull, where I don't foresee any systems heading our way. So doesn't mean we're out of the woods, by the way, because we still got a long ways to go. End of November is the end of hurricane season, and usually through the middle of October is the peak. So things could go from 0 to 60 quickly. And I would just use last year as a prime example. We had a very similar lull in the late summer, early part of the autumn, and then all of a sudden it went bonkers. And one of those storms, unfortunately, included Helene. So that happened at the end of September. So I don't want it to seem like we're saying, hey, we're out of the woods completely from tropical systems. It just means the next 10 days you don't have anything to worry about. Now, this question came up quite a bit. It was actually a question got texted to us a few times. And by the way, if you want to send us a question, you see the number on the screen there, 704-329-3600. Shoot us a question. Tim and I will try to answer it in the show today or maybe in the future if we don't get it today. The question was, are we done with the 90s? Now, I'm pretty sure Tim is done up in Greensboro. They really haven't had 90 for a while. Our last one was back on the 24th, I believe, of the month. So we've got a good stretch here where we're not going to be near 90 in the next 10 days. And if we get to the 12th, that's the average last date. You can see the last 5 years, it was the 22nd, the 7th, the 22nd, the 18th, and 11th. So really good chance we could be done, especially when you start looking at the long-range forecast, because the forecast shows below average temperatures for most of the country. In fact, well below average through the 7th. So that gets us through the 7th. If we get through the 7th and we're below normal, we're certainly not going to be hitting 90. And if we make it through 14 days into the future, which I'll show you here in a minute, that gets us through the 11th. So that gets us to the 12th, basically, without hitting 90. So there's a good sign that maybe we did have our last 90-degree day. And just to reiterate that, let's show you the 7-day forecast first. Next 7 days gets us through next Thursday, which is September 4th. Then we'll go 10 days into the future, and you can see all the way through the 7th, which is next weekend, temperatures staying below 90 degrees. So a good sign that we are going to stay cool at least through the first full week of September, and we're also going to stay hurricane and tropical storm free through this same time period. Now, no bets, promises after that that's going to happen. All bets will be off that we could probably see some warmer temperatures or even a tropical system, but it's something we're keeping an eye on. So coming up after the break, we're going to be talking a lot about Katrina today, because 20 years ago today, I was in New Orleans actually on the air, broadcasting, working for our sister station, and we were getting prepared for this storm to make landfall in southeast Louisiana and the Mississippi Gulf Coast the following morning. That's coming up after the break. All right, welcome back. Tim, thanks for joining us, Tim. The good news is we had some great weather again today, and those rain chances continue to go down for the weekend.
Yeah, they sure are. It's another fine day in the Carolinas. We're at work. We'd like this to continue over the weekend. It's looking like we might be getting that wish, right? Yeah. That would be the nice thing.
I feel like this is the week I should have taken off, because this has been an easy forecast week, right? Just super easy. Put on cruise control.
Yeah, I joke, we do our weather up here outside predominantly. We got a little weather garden out there, got a little couch. I'm just enjoying the time in between on the couch there. I'm working on the laptop as we can, but anyone at home, just enjoy this while you can. It doesn't last all year. It really is a window of opportunity, that fallish air. When you can get it, take advantage of it.
Yeah, it definitely feels great. I know you're a big college football fan, so am I. We got college football kicking off tonight across the area. We've got a big game here in Charlotte tomorrow. What's the big game you guys are watching in the Triad area?
Yeah, so today's all about Raleigh with the Pack and the Pirates. We've got Elon, which is a local Triad team. They're in Durham tonight, taking on Duke. So you have those two games going on.
Fun.
And yeah, kind of interesting. You have a couple intrastate matchups going on. I think 3 of them with the Niners and the Mountaineers tomorrow. And then we have Wake Forest playing tomorrow night as well. So in addition to high school football, you've got a little college football sprinkled in. I had to double check and make sure I was reading it right, but the Heels play on Monday.
Yeah. We were talking about that
elusive
today.
college football Monday.
It's a weird weekend to have games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think there's some games on Sunday because there's no NFL, and then Monday because it's Labor Day.
Yeah.
I was kind of jealous because I'm obviously a huge Buckeye fan, and that Texas-Ohio State game is obviously one of the biggest games of the weekend. But they wanted to move that game to Sunday night at like 7 o'clock, and Texas did not want to do it. So they chickened out. They wanted that noon kickoff game.
Did the TV overlords want to do it, or were they intent on
Trust
keeping
me,
it at
Fox
noon
would have loved to have that
window?
game prime time Sunday evening. But yeah, apparently Texas did not want a short week going into next week's game, which is silly because I don't know who they play, but it's probably some directional school that they're playing.
All right. Well, you could be like my school, and we're playing Nevada this weekend, so we'll have our hands full, hopefully.
Wow, yeah.
It'll be fine.
So big weekend of college football. Kind of nice that it actually feels like football weather out there. And obviously, that just kind of shows you that the calendar's flipping to that time of the year, Tim. And we'll be talking NFL football, Panthers a week from this weekend, a week from Sunday. We'll be kicking off as well against Jacksonville. So it'll be it's crazy to think that's already here.
It is, but a lot of times, that chill kind of arriving in the air, any sort of cool down, people don't realize it, but it does tend to signal that peak hurricane season is arriving, right? Usually when you start to get that cool down, that's usually when hurricane season is really at the peak, September, even into a little bit of October, and that kind of, shows itself whenever we get into this time of year. We have so many anniversaries. Obviously, we're talking about Katrina, but there was Hurricane Laura this week that people were talking about that I had forgotten. So many. Harvey was not that long ago either. So a lot of this weeks of the year are busy for hurricanes.
Yeah, and it's always weird because people think it's starting to cool down. Why would we have so many hurricanes? But this is when the water temperatures are at their warmest in the Atlantic, and you tend to get the calmest wind shear in the Atlantic. We might start to see cold fronts up here, which is not always a good thing. As we saw with Helene, sometimes interaction with these fronts and tropical systems are what really causes a lot of problems. Can cause them to stall, can cause them to linger, can actually help pull them into the United States. If you get a trough, sometimes it pulls it back to the west. So yeah, it is a lot of anniversaries, and one of the big ones obviously this week we've been talking a lot about, Tim, has been Katrina, and it'll be 20 years ago tomorrow that the storm made landfall on the Gulf Coast. But today is kind of a crucial kind of part of the timeline for us 20 years ago, because I was actually on the air in New Orleans. Now, in complete transparency, people was like, were you working there? Well, how does this work? Even people at my station were kind of confused, like, why was I working down there? I was actually here at WCNC for 2.5 years, but I went back to help out my former station and our sister station. So it just happened to be I had worked there, and it's also our sister station. And tomorrow we're doing a 2-hour special on this. We talked to John Gum. The whole reason I went down there was they were short-staffed, and of the only 2 meteorologists they had, one of them's wife was going into labor. And so they were going to be down to 1. So on this date 20 years ago, it was just me and Carl Ardon, only 2 meteorologists at the station, and we were tag teaming at this moment on the air, Tim, and it was crazy. We have a video here in a minute, but I want to also talk about something else that came out today that was kind of instrumental in the storm, and it's this statement, and Jeb has got it punched up. So I don't know if you remember reading this or you've read it after the fact, but this was authored by a Weather Service employee, Robert Ricks Jr., which I know personally. I knew him very well at the Slidell office. In fact, I'm still friends with him on Facebook. He was commenting on my post about this. But just read this message that he put out, and this was kind of rare at the time, obviously, for the Weather Service. I'll just read a couple things about it, but it says, Hurricane Katrina, the most powerful hurricane with unprecedented strength, rivaling the intensity of Hurricane Camille in 1969. And that was crucial because if you lived on the Gulf Coast, Camille is one of only 3 Category 5 storms to ever hit the U.S. Most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks or longer, and at least half of well-constructed homes will have roofs and wall failure all gabled roofs will fail, leaving those homes severely damaged or destroyed. Some of the wording in here, Tim, is kind of alarming, but it actually ended up being pretty true to what happened. And I think at the time this was somewhat controversial that the Weather Service would put a statement like this out, but this has actually been a template that has been reused. In fact, a similar one was issued for Helene last year from the GSP office. So what are your thoughts on this PNS, we call it, and do you remember reading this or reading it after the fact?
Yeah, I definitely remember it, and I kind of remember the same reaction that I can only imagine what you were feeling in the weather office when you got this. But just to answer your question, I think it points to a couple of things. We talk a lot about being forecasters, but really as meteorologists, we're communicators. And in this case, they were signaling, I think, to the public, but also to the broadcasters, hey, this is what we're expecting. This is kind of the urgency we want you to get out there. When you can compare it to another disaster that people know about or their grandparents talk about, or like a generational storm, in that case, Camille down there that does something, when you can pinpoint the exact impacts that are probably going to happen, and they're that jaw-dropping to half the homes are going to lose their roofs. Like, those are two things that really just, kind of stop you in your tracks.
Yeah.
And you brought up with Helene last year, they did issue a statement that had catastrophic flooding will rival the flood of, I believe it was 1915 or 16, right?
Yep. I
think part of the problem is that anybody alive in Western North Carolina, they don't remember that. That's a plaque on the wall. Those are differences, but similarities. What were you thinking when you saw this come down in real time?
I think it was just the realization that I think for me, we kind of knew, but I think for a lot of the anchors and the news employees, because we read this on the air, I remember reading it live, and the look on their face was like, I think it was when it finally hit them, like, wow, this is real. This is not a drill. This is not, because one of the things about Katrina that I think if you watch some of the documentaries, which there's a couple of them out there right now, New Orleans, and I have worked down there, people didn't evacuate for storms because there had been so many that had been near misses. And you heard this a lot pre-Katrina, like, I've stayed for this storm, this storm, and nothing happened. And so I think this was a statement that tried to hit those people, like, hey, I know you've been here for Ivan, which churned, or you've been here for Hermine, or Isidore, all these other storms that have been close calls. This is not that storm. This is the big one. This is the one we're worried about. And the levee system was only designed for a Category 3 hurricane, and at the time, this was a Category 5. And so that was a real concern that the levees were going to fail because they just were not designed for this type of storm. So just to go back in time, and I hope Jeb has this, I see it pulled up. This was one of the hits I did with Carl Arredondo this night 20 years ago during our coverage of WWL.
Brad Panovich in the Weather Center.
Yeah, Carl, we're really starting to see those winds pick up now that we're seeing these squalls and these rain bands move through the area. Conditions, probably in the last 20 minutes, we've seen winds go from about 20 sustained now up to 40. That's tropical storm force winds now that for an extended period of time. I think we're pretty much socked in now with those strong winds. Let's go to pinpoint Doppler radar, show you where the storms are right now. And we have some bands of heavier rain beginning to move back into the area. Just a side note, that box you see right there, that is actually the tornado watch, which is in effect till 2 o'clock in the morning. And because of the tornado watch, I'm going to keep a particular eye on these individual storms. These is where you get little spin-ups on the tips of these little storms as they rotate in from the east to the west. And we'll put this into motion. You can see the movement as these rain bands wrap into the region. Right now in the CBD, we're not seeing a lot of rain, few passing showers, but the winds are picking up, as Carl had mentioned. We'll head downriver through Plaquemines Parish, Myrtle Grove, some heavy rain, Point Lahash down towards Port Sulphur. These areas down here are seeing winds close to 60 and 70 miles per hour already across this area. To kind of give you an indication of how strong those winds actually are, let's throw some of those winds up there for you. We're going to put what we call wind barbs on there, and I'll move this out real quickly and give you an idea. You can see the flow. We can actually tell that the center is right down in this region here. So it's moving to the north-northwest at about 11 miles per hour. We have very strong wind field here moving in across this region. So that's beginning to push the water. Everywhere you see these little barbs going like that, that's pushing water into eastern St. Bernard and Plaquemines Parish. And again, that water is going to come in through Lake Bourne into Lake Pontchartrain, and we're going to see that extremely heavy rain move into the region. I want to show you the 1 hour rainfall totals just to give you an idea of how much rain. Look at these totals down here closer to the eye wall. We're talking inch, 2 inches, 3 inches per hour. This is not over a couple hours, this is just in 1 hour, and we get several hours of this rainfall. You kind of get an idea of how much rain could fall. These are storm totals that we're showing you right now based on Doppler radar. Down near Venice, we have about 6 inches of rain has fallen. Down near Grand Isle, 4 inches plus. But of course, out here in the Gulf, a couple of these green areas, you're looking at rainfall totals approaching 8 inches.
Let's check in on the Gulf Coast as the storm is going to have an impact.
Yeah, so Tim, that was evidence that I actually had hair at some point in my career, and also, man, I sounded like a baby back then. That was it's kind of weird to see that, but that was part of the reason I was actually impressed. Like the fact that I could pronounce all those things, I think was part of the reason they brought me back was because I was familiar with most of the parishes and towns, and it seemed like I had never left, even though it had been about 2.5 years.
That's part of the battle. Whenever you're someone, weather, news, whatever, you move to another part of the country, you have to learn how to say all the towns, even a different part of the state. You've got to figure that out. But that's a nice little time capsule there of the technology, of the fashion, of all of those intense, rain bands that start to move in, though.
Yeah.
And part of my question, just watching this, you said there were only 2 of you. Did you guys just do the storm the whole time, or did you take breaks at all?
So pretty much I had forgot I did the morning show that morning, and then I think I might have taken a nap because up in the upstairs conference room they had put cots out, and it was like a dark room, and there was it felt like you were in like a barracks for like a military installation, and there was just people sleeping. You just go in there and take a nap, and then the GM's office had a shower and you could go shower.
Yeah.
So I think I took a nap in the middle of the day, but I came back down and we tag teamed pretty much the rest of the night, and I don't think I slept for like 48 hours because later that night we were going to stay at the station as long as we possibly could until the last minute, and then we got evacuated to the Hyatt Regency Superdome. And they called us over because they basically said, hey, if you guys don't get over here, we're locking the doors and we're not going to let you in. So we all ran over there, and what happened was half the station had evacuated to Baton Rouge, and we handed the coverage off to them out of LSU's journalism school, where they were broadcasting out of their college studio. That's what they were doing. And so we handed it off to them. And then I ended up spending most of my time, and now Jeb, you could bring up my laptop here. So if you watch the Netflix documentary, you'll see this. This is the Hyatt Regency ballroom. This is where I spent the storm. I was mostly in here with all these evacuees. There was, I think, about 5,000 people in this hotel. They weren't all guests. What happened was people who could not evacuate the city did vertical evacuation. They came to these high-rise hotels, and they went up as high as they could to get out of the water, but not too high to be in the wind. But they made us all go to this room, and we all just camped out on the floor. And then these were the images. I kept going outside. Obviously, as a meteorologist, I'm like running outside every couple minutes to see what it's like. The front of the building had the sandbags to kind of keep the water out. And then the storm hit while we were sleeping. I got up a couple times and went outside. The next morning, I'm going to show you quickly. I'm going to zoom through these. This is just some of the damage, but I want to show you the front of the hotel here in a second, because every window, I think, in the west-facing part of this hotel was damaged. That was my room. 15th floor. I wasn't up there. I went up there to get my luggage, which I thankfully put in the bathroom and shut the door. But that was the view out my window, which was broken, and that was the Superdome right there. We went back down the stairs. That was the elevators. There was water pouring down. I don't know if you can tell there, but water pouring down from the roof. We gathered all our stuff and we ventured out. And when I turned around and looked at the building, and I'm going to show you that image here, coming into view right here, that's the Hyatt Regency in the middle, and you can see every window on that side of the building was gone. It was crazy. And one of the biggest hazards is getting back to the station, believe it or not. You couldn't go more than like 100 yards without getting a flat tire. There was just nails and glass everywhere, and so one of the photographers had a whole box of that Fix-It-Flat stuff, and we were just pumping the tires up with what we had. And we actually went back to the station, Tim, in the French Quarter, and we got there.
Wow.
Every light was on. The air conditioning was running. It was fine because we had a generator. And like the whole time I'm thinking, why didn't we stay here? And I actually spent the night in the weather center the following night. Did not know the levees broke at this time. That's how crazy it was.
It's amazing. You know, it seems like Katrina actually moved a little bit more quickly than a lot of other hurricanes do. It kind of came in and got out. But hurricanes are the one weather event where there's a before and there's an after when they really hit. And you've just shown us the before and then the after. There is no pre-Katrina New Orleans anymore, just as if with Helene up in the mountains, there's a before and there's an after. And we'll see a lot more of that tomorrow on the special.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with one last picture here. So this was the next morning after I spent the night in the weather center. That water down on the street, which you can see, was the first time I noticed water, and I asked myself, where was that water coming from? And about 30 minutes later, we got the call that levees had broke. And I noticed that water, Tim, the next morning. I was like, where's this water coming from? Because it hadn't rained in like 24, 36 hours. I'm like, why is there water pouring down the street? And that was like the first sign to us that something had happened. So tomorrow, tune in. We're doing 2 hours of this. WWL is going to give us some coverage as well. And we're going to talk to John Gum, who was a meteorologist that I was going down to help replace because his wife was going into labor. His story's crazy in and of itself. He's trying to cover the storm, Tim. His wife gives birth 24 hours, and then he's got to evacuate a newborn and his wife during the middle of the storm. It's crazy.
Gosh. Looking forward to seeing that. Special.
All right, guys, stick around. Colin is coming up next with more Impact News, and stay tuned for that Katrina special tomorrow at 6:30.